Hey, it's Khalil with the Cashflow Contractor. Thanks for listening and tuning in. If you haven't hit the subscribe button yet, now's a great time to do it. If you are interested in building your construction business to be profitable and to run without you so you can have less stress, more time, and more money, we want to send you more content that can help you do that. I talk to contractors all the time who listen while they're driving from job site to job site, while they're taking care of stuff in the office or at home. And it's a great podcast for them because it gives them actual ideas and strategies they can use inside their business in a conversational format with two goobers like me and Martin. So if you're interested in that, you want more strategies to help you grow and improve your business, subscribe now. Now, let's get into the show.
Going from 1 million to 10 million, that's a difficult challenge. It's a different skill set required than going from 0 to a million. How do we get to 100 million is like the current quest. And it's a very different set of skills that's required. I really believe that software will be the unlock for the next 10 to 15 years before robotics starts to really impact our industry. I learned the hard way. We scaled up massively a year ago. December, January, February, we tripled members every month and we crashed everything. Like, it was horrible. All home services that I have seen, there's one Achilles heel that is the denominator between every home service, just about every home service. And that is...
Today's episode is sponsored by OpenPhone. It's the perfect business phone system for contractors that you can manage just from your cell phone. If you're interested in hearing more about OpenPhone, check out the show notes to get an offer directly from them. The link is right here and you'll find it down the show notes. Thanks for checking out today's episode, brought to you by OpenPhone.
Expert advice, practical tips, real-life stories. Have less stress, more time, and more money in your business. Welcome to the Cashflow Contractor.
Well, Martin, I think this is probably we've had some return guests, but not this far apart. So, Mike, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so we'll link in the show notes to our previous episode, but a lot's probably happened since then for you. Why don't you catch us up on kind of what you're doing today?
Yeah, so I guess it was 4 years ago that I was on. So at that time, we probably had about somewhere between 10 and 30 locations inside Augusta Nation. Now we have 155 and we've expanded to Canada and Australia. And so it's been a wild ride. And then in that time, we've also started software that we use for our company, but also sell it publicly for Copilot CRM. So yeah, it's been crazy, but it's been a lot of fun. And I've had to kind of do the next level of scaling, which is, after, going from 1 million to 10 million, that's a difficult challenge. It's a different skill set required than going from 0 to a million. And now that we're past that, it's a matter of like learning that next skill. How do we get to 100 million is like the current quest. And it's a very different set of skills that's required.
Yeah. I'm not there. I've seen it though, and it is a very different skill set. So Augusta Lawn Care, you franchise it out. And then you also own, do you run your own still location or not really?
Yeah, so I owned 7 last time we talked. I sold off some of them to my general managers, and so now I still own 2. So it's good though, because I have an ability to be able to test stuff out before we kind of roll things out. Sure. And then we usually do it kind of incrementally, but it's always nice to have some kind of a guinea pig to test things out on.
Yeah, absolutely. And last time we did talk about pay for performance. We love that model and that idea. We've referred your software a lot. Tell us about Copilot CRM. I actually didn't know. I heard about it, but I don't really know much about it.
Yeah. So first off, like, part of it was we did want to integrate P4P in the software into Copilot, so that way you don't have to do manual data entry. Instead, employees can actually see when they first show up at work, like how much revenue they're projected to make for the day. And then as they complete jobs in Copilot, they actually see, like on a thermometer, how much money they're making. And it kind of is a speedometer in terms of like how much you're making per hour. So it actually is a little bit more gamified now because we have that integration between Copilot and P4P. But the inclination in terms of creating Copilot, because there's like a ton of softwares out there. But I really believe that software will be the unlock for the next 10 to 15 years before robotics starts to really impact our industry. And so I wanted to make sure that we have full control of that. And we can vertically integrate it with the web design stuff that we do, with P4P, the software, with Command Center, and a lot of the other stuff that I want to do for the industry. So it was just kind of a key part. I think it's kind of like building the highway. If you look at map of the United States, you have railroads, you have waterways, you have highways, and those are the things that kind of like interlock and connect all the different cities. And so whether it be robotics down the road, whether it be things that I'm passionate about in terms of lead creation for owners, all of that comes back to, I think, software. And it'll be kind of like that major highway that connects a lot of the things that we're trying to do. And so, it's been a crazy ride. And like, I learned that it is very different to the world of software, and it's not easy. Everyone's like, oh, you just, throw some stuff up. It's not that way if you're going to do it right.
Yeah, make it
Yeah,
happen.
no, it's horrible. So, I learned the hard way. We scaled up massively a year ago, December, January, February. We tripled members every month, and we crashed everything. Like, it was horrible. Like I came in very, very clearly that I did not have the skill set required to run a software company. And so that's been a learning curve this past year, restructuring, rebuilding, recoding, hiring new engineers, etc. And so we're getting it back on track, and looking forward to the future though.
Very cool. I want to understand it a little bit more. So let's focus on the CRM aspect. So obviously at the core of a CRM, you have contacts, you have companies, maybe you have vendors in there, partners, but really just kind of customer data. And then you use that to then do other things with the data. So what are some of the other aspects of the CRM and Copilot that you're doing in addition to that P4P side that you mentioned?
Yeah. So I think about CRM, I think of it like the most elementary part would be me in a notebook, taking track of customers' information. Step up from that is probably like an Excel spreadsheet, again, keeping track of customers' information. A step up from that, kind of more in the CRM world, customer relationship management, is communicating with the customer through a tool. I think most softwares can get there. And I think that everyone should upgrade to any software outside of, get above the spreadsheet, get above, paper and pen, get into CRM. I think the part that's going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years that is important is how do we take the relationship with the customer, the communication with the customer, and actually drive business results? And so whether that be upselling customers and having a strategy around that, whether it be garnering more reviews, whether it be garnering referrals, whether that be not just knowing the metrics of the business, but actually being predictive in terms of what the business owner should be doing based upon the numbers, is something that I'm super passionate about. And so we started Copilot literally a month before ChatGPT came out. And so our original notion of like Copilot was like actually the Copilot in your business, not like this whole like AI thing. So we might have to actually rebrand, because there's now everyone has their Copilot, and it's annoying as all get out. And everyone thinks we're an AI company. It's like, no, we literally do the worst, like the opposite of AI, which is like fix things. But anyways, that being said, it's just a matter of now how can we take the nature of P4P, where we can tell what the most efficient employee is. We can tell which crews are most efficient, which ones are underperforming, and have an efficiency score. And how do we actually then tell the business owner using Copilot, like, hey, this employee should work with so-and-so because they're underperforming. This employee over the past 5 weeks has been crushing efficiency, and this week is like really bad. Maybe you should go talk to them and just like see if they're good, make sure everything's fine, but like their performance has dropped dramatically. So how do we use software to actually make changes in the business, whether it be on HR perspective, from a pricing perspective, et cetera, is really where I think the future is.
Quick ad break to tell you about Growth Kits. This is actually my company, and you may have seen it around, but I started Growth Kits because I kept seeing contractors struggle with the same problems over and over again. They were trying to be better organized inside of their business, but kept drowning in the day-to-day operations. So whether you need a better CRM, a hiring process that actually works, or you just want to make sense of the tech stack inside of your business, we have systems that are built specifically for contractors. You can either grab our DIY guides and implement these systems yourself, or you can hire us to work with you on it and implement it for you. No massive consulting fees, no year-long commitments or monthly retainers. Just pick what you need right now, and let's get it done together. Head over to growth-kits.com to see how we can help you construct your success one system at a time. That's growth-kits.com, or just click the link in the show notes. Now, back to the show.
Can you jump back a little bit, because a lot of people might not have heard it first? P4P is transformational. Would you define it a little bit more in depth what it is?
Yeah, so it's pay for performance. And so we short form it as just P for P. And ultimately, in a nutshell, it's the harder you work, the more money you make. And if you're like, well, that's cool, but like, give me more. Okay, well, it's a percentage. You make a percentage of the labor revenue that you earn for the business. It's essentially a commission job. And so the pushback then is, well, if you do that, they're going to work so fast and they're going to do a bad quality job. And so there's all these little things that if you took business owners and put them in a room and said, okay, we're going to pay commission instead of hourly, they'd come up with 10 different reasons why that's not going to be a good thing. And so what we had to do with P4P is like, how do we address each of those problems? So for example, the quality metric. Okay, well, anything above base pay is going to be considered performance dollars or a bonus on your paycheck. That money is on the table if you do bad quality jobs. And how do we measure that? Yellow slips. That's when I have a callback, a customer cancels, there's a complaint. These can be deductions from the performance dollars, not their base pay. That's protected legally. But anything above that, we can take out of their paycheck if they are going too fast, cutting corners, doing low quality standard work, etc. And there's so many other elements like, well, what about if they're doing shop work? What if they're doing equipment maintenance? Well, these are the type of things that need to be thought through. What if there's one person that's super skilled and it's very expensive, and then the junior person? How does that split between those two people happen in terms of the revenue they earn for that day? These are the type of questions that would come up. And this is why I never switched to P4P, because of all these different variables. And so it's a matter of like, what are the variables? How do we actually determine that? How do we create a system around it? And all of it fits on 2 pages. And you can literally in 2 pages explain to an entry-level employee how P4P works, the different ramifications around all these different quote unquote variables. But the reason I did it, to answer your question, is like, my business was unprofitable. We were growing quickly. I was sick and tired of not being able to give raises to people that deserved it. And yet other people made more money than them simply because they had asked for a raise at the right time. And I so happened to be able to afford it. Or I needed the employee more at a certain time. They asked and I'm like, oh, I have to give it to them. That's not fair. It's not fair to the employee that they get more money based upon just being there longer even. It's like, well, you've been here 5 years, so therefore they get more money. How is that fair? They sit in the truck, take a 3-hour lunch break, 5 smoke breaks, and stop at every gas station while they're driving around. And you got a new guy out here hustling his butt off, packs a lunch, and is hustling on every single job, potentially making the business 2 to 3 times more in profit per hour. And yet they're going to make less than the guy who's been here for 5 years. How is that fair? How is it fair that someone gets a raise because they know the boss or because the boss knows they're going through a tough time? These are the type of things that are not fair to the team member. And so aligning the incentives of the owner and the employee, which is we want the job done efficiently and we want it done to the highest quality standard for the customer, is good for everyone.
Yeah, no, so good. We talk about pay for performance a lot because it's truly aligns incentives, like you just said. So I'm curious. So obviously you're in lawn care, you're service contractor is what I would classify that as, home service company, whatever you want to call it. What does Copilot CRM specific to that? Or does it go to other types of contractors? Okay.
Yeah, what's crazy is like, so we started off and obviously we were trying to scratch a lot of arches with lawn care, landscaping, project-based work, a lot around recurring jobs. But as we've started, like more than 30% of members inside of Copilot are other services. Like the other day, there was a paper shredding company. Like they do like confidential documents. They're on there.
Yeah,
they
yeah.
do a route. They go to different companies every week. So they're in there. So it really isn't just lawn care, landscaping, but it is still the bulk of it just because of my audience.
Gotcha. Yeah, for sure. That totally makes sense. Okay. You mentioned that there's some challenges that, obviously as an entrepreneur, you have to be somewhat optimistic and blind to what the challenges are going to be, or else you won't really get started. But what were the things that kind of came up with running the software company? Because I'm sure there's listeners out there that are probably more critical of software companies than they realize. They don't understand the effort behind the ask when, why don't we have this feature or whatever it is. So what are some of those things that came up?
It's just one button, Khalil. It's just one button.
I
If you could
know,
just add
I
me
know.
that one button, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say like, this is something I've been thinking about a lot last couple weeks. I've said to our owners, like on our mastermind and stuff, and I said like the chasm between good and great is vast, as it should be. And so like that became like extremely apparent to me when we started Copilot. And it's like, okay, it's good. And then we started to ramp up and it miserably failed and everything broke. And then I realized like, okay, the amount of work that's required to actually make this a phenomenal piece of software is like massive. And so the amount of investment, the level of engineers, like recruiting these engineers, because they're like great engineers have plenty of jobs. Like they aren't looking for work. And so how do I have a vision large enough for them to actually want to leave a really good job with a really good company with a really good stock package to come work for me? And I don't have a great track record. And so, the skill of recruitment, the skill of being able to share your vision succinctly to be able to attract someone that wants to join along in that vision has been the skill that I've had to refine. Like, hey, okay, we're going to go public and it's going to be within the next 7 to 10 years. And here's what that's going to look like. And we're going to bring together the franchise, the media, and Copilot and the software side together, and we're going to go public. And like, how do we work towards that? And like being very, very clear with that is important to be able to attract the type of talent required to scale that chasm of good to great. And so, depending much more on who instead of what I'm doing, I've always been someone who's like, oh, I see a problem, I'll just keep working until it's finished. I cannot code. I cannot fix these problems. And so it's very humbling to encounter problems in your business that you cannot fix them. It will require you working through other people. And that's a skill it is not necessarily inherently baked into many of us. It's not just even leadership and being a great manager. It's a matter of being able to inspire others that have the skills you need, and you cannot attain those skills. So that's been the learning curve over the past 8 to 9 months.
Well, and I think that's probably really valuable. Probably the most valuable skill you can learn as an entrepreneur. I think a lot of the construction owners that are probably listening to this podcast don't have that skill. I think I've learned some of that, but I think for the most part, I know how to get the job done. I just need to show someone how to do it so they can do it themselves. They can do it for me as well, rather than I need to find the person who can solve the problems I don't even know how to do. It's very difficult. And I think it holds a lot of our audience back, quite frankly, from reaching the next step because they're the bottleneck.
And I think like the role of an owner kind of changes as you begin to grow the business, right? So like I've always said, between 0 and 200,000, really the role of the owner is that of a laborer. They're doing the work, like using your hands. You're out there, you're having physical stress, just getting work done. And then as you begin to grow from like 200,000 to 800,000 in annual revenue, that's when you have to become a great manager. That's the role of the owner, is now being a manager. You manage other people to do the work. You work through them. You can't be out in the field every day. You're quote out of the field. You're out off the truck. You're doing more sales and admin, etc. And that stress is usually around finances, because your margins drop significantly when you stop becoming a revenue producing team member. But then I think like once you pass 800,000, 1 million, and start to scale the business, really the role of the owner switches to that of an architect. And that's someone who steps away from the building. They're not even managing the people that are doing the work. They have no idea how to do the concrete. They have no idea how to actually implement what they've written down. But they know how to step back, observe, and then be able to find people that go then manage the people that actually do the work. And so many times I find a contracting business will stop growing because the founder fails to go to the next level of leadership that is required for them to keep growing. And so what happens, how that looks, is a $1 million company where the owner jumps into the field when things go bad. It is the owner that is just getting started and only $100,000 in annual revenue. They just got their first few projects under their belt, and they're trying to think about like acquisitions and multiple locations and hiring a general manager. And it's like, no, you're in this stage. You should be a laborer. And then over here, you're an architect. Stop jumping into the field. There is no admiration in trying to like lead from the top when you're a multi-million-dollar company. You should not be doing that. The architect doesn't jump in and be like, let me help you dig that. And so that's kind of what I've seen, just to kind of follow up on your point.
No, that's really great. I think one that I also see, and I'm curious if you see this, is the owner really being so heavily involved in sales, and especially probably in that 2 to 800 phase, even up to the 2 million stage. And what ends up happening is they start trying to create value through the sales process rather than sticking to like, no, like this is the system that we use. This is how we sell. These are the, line items. And it essentially spreads the scope of work too far. And then they start doing all these random things for people rather than staying to like what they should be doing. And that limits growth as well. Do you see that a lot?
Yeah, 100%. Recently, I did an analysis of a little over 100 companies, some of them Augusta, some of them outside lawn care, almost 150, all home services, and consistently across the board with very low levels of variance. The levels of profits from $800,000 in annual revenue to $1.5 million in annual revenue, there's like a gap there. Like no one makes more money in that phase. And basically you have to double the business. And the reason for that many times is, to your point, you have to go hire more overhead people because you can no longer manage everything by yourself in terms of overhead. Like at $600,000, you can have a part-time office person manage all the jobs, manage all the sales, do all the hiring. When you start getting past 800,000, you have to start delegating, but that comes at a cost. And so many times what then we do as owners, we slide into the sales role and we put on our hat, a sales hat, like you said, and like, oh, I'll offer that service and I'll customize this and I'll alter this. Like, oh yes, you can do the irrigation. We'll also add that. And, oh, we'll do a wall too. Yeah, we'll figure that out. And we're doing that because we're trying to get to we have to keep growing the business just to make ends meet. And so I agree with you 100% in terms of like, how can we simplify the business? How we cut out services? Like the fastest way to grow any business is add more services and add more geographic expansion. Like just serve more people. That's the fastest way to grow. Also the least profitable. Also usually the least for your sanity. The reason I say sanity is because it's impossible to hand off to people. I would rather have a business that has $700,000-$800,000 in annual revenue, but I can hand it off to basically anyone with 2 or 3 weeks of training versus having a $1.5-2 million business. And to your point, I have to train someone for 6 months on the sales process because it's all over the place. And so also when you look at enterprise value or what could I sell this business for, it's a really good indicator as to how have I built this business in a way where it produces value in excess of the assets on my books. And that only comes as a result of being able to have the systems where you can hand it off to someone else and they can sell. Because if you can't sell, you can't have operations and you can't have admin, systematizing the business, no one wants it. It becomes a job. And so I think that's like a good framework sometimes to understand, like letting go of things, systematization, cutting out services, cutting out service areas is important. I talked to a contractor the other day doing $4.5 million in annual revenue. They have about $25,000 a month in payments on some debt and another $20,000 in debt that they're trying to pay off per month in payments. And they're really in a bad spot because they can't not grow. They have to keep generating enough leads just to pay the debt payments. But I think that so many contractors, we actually stripped it back. It's like, why did we grow the business in a way where we had 30 departments? Why did we grow the business in a way where no one could do the sales process? Like you're stuck. Like the individual I was talking to is stuck. They have to keep growing. They have to keep pouring money into marketing and they have to keep offering services they know are not profitable simply to be able to pay the bills. And so this is why, like, you know, I'm passionate about this, but like even your guys' podcast, like cash flow, make profit, like build businesses that has systems in it. Like everyone talks about like built to sell. I love that book. I think about it too as like built to leave. I want to build my business in a way where I can leave the business and I can pass it off to my family down the road. I can sell it to someone else. I can do a lot of things, or I can hand it off to a general manager and I go on a vacation. Just to kind of back up what you were saying there.
No, that's great. We talk about that a lot.
Excellent.
Hey, you. Yes, you. Please take a moment and subscribe to our podcast. If you're getting value from what we're talking about here on the Cashflow Contractor, please do us a favor and just click subscribe. If you're on YouTube, click subscribe. Apple Podcasts, hit subscribe. Spotify, hit subscribe. And if you want our weekly newsletter straight to your inbox every single week, click subscribe down in the show notes. Really, really easy. I know that you're probably listening while you're driving from job site to job site, or you're working on something in the office or at home, or you're mowing the lawn, but just take a second and subscribe for us. It would mean the world to us. We know that you're trying to build a profitable construction business that operates without you. We're trying to build a profitable podcast that operates with us, and you're a huge part of that. So please subscribe. We'd love to help you even more and help other contractors find our content as well. We all do better when we share what works. Thanks for listening. Let's get back to the episode. Martin, why don't you talk a little bit about the dangers of growth? I know that one thing, like if I say, hey, Martin, I want to double my business, what's the challenge with that?
Well, I think Mike has done a great job. People take the challenge as selling, and that may be, but it's not the challenge. It's can you keep up with it? The concept of working capital. A lot of people wind up in the business and never heard of that. You know, if you're going to double your sales and you don't change systemically, you're doubling your receivables. If you have inventory, I don't know whether you guys mostly have inventory, but unless you improve your system there, you have double the inventory. So it's ignorance, but I love what you're saying about focus. That comes up in my coaching all the time. You said sprinklers. We're landscapers. We're going to do sprinklers. Okay. It could be, I'm trying to think of one I had this week. Well, that's a related business. I said, it's a related business you know nothing about.
But it's
and
on a
you don't
house.
have
It's on a
people
house.
who-
Surely I can do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Literally. Yeah. It's a service and it's to people,
I can make
right?
money doing this. No problem.
Yeah. And the other thing is, if you've known me very long, you know that I'm always talking about variable costs and keeping the margins up. But there also is the overhead, keeping the damn overhead down. And like if one way I like to express it, if somebody leaves, a critical person, a manager leaves, do not hire a replacement until you're absolutely sure you needed that position in the first place. Because once you get the people in, it's pretty hard to go out there and tell them, you know, we really don't need you. You're dead weight. So anyway, yeah, it's staying efficient. It's focus. I think, Mike, you just mentioned almost all of it. And to be aware of it, I mean, it's so sexy to got my first $1 million job. Really? Well, I'm coming to the funeral and I'll get the flowers ordered because you're dead. I mean, I have a client that there's no chance. They had no idea of it. It's $1 million and they had to discount to get it. Right. Anyway.
Yeah. I think this is a really valuable conversation for people to understand the impact of growth, just how challenging that is. I'm curious, Mike, with the software, because I'm really interested in this Copilot. So how is Copilot going to help me understand my limitations on growth, maybe? Where is that going to come in?
Yeah. So I believe that every business and how big it should be is a math problem. And I think it all comes down to capacities. There's assets, there's asset capacity. In other words, how many trucks and how much equipment do I need to have? There is personal capacity, i.e. I will blow my brains out and lose my marbles and I'll get divorced and have all sorts of problems if I grow the business to past a certain level. And then there is your labor capacity. These are the three capacities that dictate how big a business gets. And that is how many employees I have, how many trucks I have, and when am I going to lose my marbles personally based upon how big the business gets. And so these are things that can be determined. And I think that in any short period of time, I can expand past my personal capacity. I can expand past my labor capacity. I can drive my guys to work overtime. I can tell them, hey, everyone's has to work 14 hours a day. I can do that in the short term and I will make more profit in the short term. But in the long term, exceeding your capacities will lead to burnout, whether it be your trucks, your employees, or you yourself personally. And so when we look at something like Copilot, one example is whenever someone's scheduling a job, they should know, can I actually get this job done within my labor capacity? And if not, I should probably know about that, even if I'm booking out into the future. What is my labor capacity and am I overbooked? Because so many of us show up all of a sudden and we're a week away from a big job that was scheduled 3 months ago and suddenly realize, oh my word, we don't have enough employees. We got to reschedule the job. When this is simply a software calculation problem. And that is I could have told you 6 months ago that you wouldn't have the capacity to do this job because you're completely overbooked. And so we're trying to take how can we actually take all the numbers? Because we know budget hours. We know how much things cost. We know all these numbers are in these CRMs and inside software. But how do we actually pull that out and be like, hey, red flag, in 3 months when you're putting this job on the schedule, you're going to be over your labor capacity. You're either A, going to need to hire more people to increase your capacity, or you've got to reschedule the job. So that's one example, but it's just so important, I feel, to take the software and the numbers, and everyone talking about knowing your numbers and knowing your KPIs. I agree. It's the step one, but really taking those numbers and understanding what do I do with those numbers is where I feel we're dropping the ball. And we tell everyone to know their numbers, and I'm a huge advocate, know your close ratio, know your variable cost, your fixed cost, everything that we talked about. But then it's like, well, what do I do with that number? Like, what does it mean to do actually, what do I hire people? Should I hire more people? When do I hire more people? Should I advertise more? Is my close ratio high? Is it low? How do I impact my close ratio? And these are the type of things that I want to actually, my goal with the software over the next year is to get to the point where we're actually prescribing things to the owner. So it's like, hey, yes, you could go get more jobs and go do more sales. And yes, that is super, super sexy. And to Martin's point, that's what everyone thinks they need. Or is it the fact that if we just improved your close ratio from 20% to 40%, you would double the business? Or if we increased the average value per customer per year from $2,000 to $4,000 using upsells, we would double your business. And so these are the type of things I think software can do. And this is why we started, because I think there's a lot of really good softwares out there, better than us in terms of like in the current moment, in terms of reporting, knowing your numbers, knowing your metrics, having job costing, etc. There are better softwares than us, but what most of them are not doing is being prescriptive around when do I hire? When do I raise prices? Which services are the least profitable that I should be cutting out to simplify my services? And that's really the goal.
Yeah, we're laughing over here because Martin has his book, The Profit Problem, and that's what he talks about. Like, yeah, know your numbers, but then what do you use? How do you use the actual numbers?
You know, what's fascinating, and maybe you're doing this, if not, it's something, you get the numbers, so you have good books, so you have accurate margins, you know what they are. People don't generally go figure their break even from that. This is how much you have to sell. The people I meet don't do that. And if the software did that, just told you, hey, you have to do this much because part of your dashboard. You have to do this much to break even on expenses, make a profit. You also have to cover your cash payments. So you have to make enough profit in a month to and collect it to pay your overhead expenses and your debt service. That is, I think, what you're talking about. That's where, that's what I have to do. I mean, you're going deeper than that with the labor productivity and so on. But yeah, I don't know anything anywhere that does that except the owner himself or herself.
Yeah, and I think like that's probably what you're talking about there is probably not what we're getting to for a few years. What I'm trying to attack at first, to be honest, is like, how do I get more jobs? Because that's what everyone wants. Well, do I need to advertise more? No. You need to get to the estimates faster. It's taking you 3.5 days to go from lead to just on their property. If we get that in one day, I know for a fact people will not complain about you being to their property faster after they request an estimate. Better yet, can we do it instantly? Can we get on your website to where they sign up and they check out from your website? That would make that 0. So we're probably going after like more of the entry level stuff. We're not there yet, Martin, in terms of the more of the financial aspect, but definitely down the road to be something we want to look at. We have the job costing software, but to your point, we are not going prescriptive on that yet. What we're really trying to focus on, what are the things that lead to the bad numbers, the overhead of being too high? What leads to a bad close ratio? What leads to bad pricing and bad profits?
One thing I think maybe software would certainly help with, but when I talk to people who aren't getting the finance part of it, not because they're stupid, we just aren't there yet, say, okay, what would be different around here if you got one more job per week per truck? You got 19 trucks, and each job brings you $250 worth of, maybe not for lawn care, but $250 of margin. Just add it up. There's no additional overhead to do that. Just add it up. And anyway, I'm with you 100%. It tells you what you need to do.
Quick ad break. If you're like most contractors I talk to, you're probably drowning in day-to-day operations. I see it time and time again. You're wearing too many hats and there's no way off of the hamster wheel. That's exactly why I put together a free guide. It's called 24 Things You Need to Hire the Perfect Assistant. Now, I put this guide together to help any small business owner delegate over 50% of their current workload and buy back 20 hours of their time. And you may think that's unrealistic, but the most successful contractors I know all have one thing in common: a full-time assistant who helps them run their business. And this guide walks you through everything you need to know about finding and training the perfect assistant, from creating clear expectations all the way to building out the right systems. It's not a fluffy PDF, it's really to the point, but it's still over 35 pages of actual practical steps that you can use right now. I've included templates, examples, and real processes that we use to help other contractors implement the right executive assistant. So the link for this guide is in the show notes. You can click it and download it. It'll be sent right to your email. Now, back to the episode. Mike, I'm curious about a couple of things. You had mentioned earlier that the previous locations, you had 7, now you're at 2, you sold to general managers. What makes a great general manager?
Great question. So I actually think there's a few different types of general managers.
Okay.
So we kind of define them as a starter, a working GM, and then what we call the GM plus model. So basically, a starter GM is someone who wants to start a location from scratch. They're going to be very, very sales hungry. They don't mind pounding pavement. They love running ads. They love doing estimates. They are very sales driven, sales motivated. How we do our comp plan for them is going to be different also, because we want them to scale as fast as possible. They also get bored when you start making the business profitable and leveling out growth. And so one of my best general managers is who I sold my locations to, because he was bored after growing 2 or 3 of them to the size and then just putting them in like, hey, this is where we're going to stay at this size. We're going to make it profitable. We're going to raise prices. We're going to optimize pricing. We're going to cut out service. We're going to simplify. He's like, I'm bored. And it's because he was a starter. He was more entrepreneurial. And then I think of a working GM. A working GM, in my opinion, can manage up to 8 employees max. And they are going to usually do a business in our world up to $800,000 in annual revenue. During peak season, maybe 7, 8 employees. Less peak season, maybe 4 or 5 employees, maybe 3, 4 trucks. Again, in lawn care and landscaping, the numbers scale up for different services a little bit. But the reason I call them working GM is because their time is actually spent in the field a little bit, in addition to doing sales. Like, their main objective is get jobs and also manage your crew. Once we scale past 800,000, typically the general manager is no longer in the field. They are really just there to train the team. They are there to hire, fire, and train. And so when it comes to those 3, I'm kind of looking at different aspects. So if they're a starter, I'm like, can they sell? Can they literally go up to knock on a stranger's door and sell them something? That's like probably my number 1 priority. A working GM, I'm making sure they're obsessed about systems, procedures, and optimization. Because at that level, they're not going to have mass amounts of growth, but I want them to be very driven from a compensation perspective based on a profit. And I want them to love tweaking little things, like parking the truck slightly different to save 5 seconds. That's the type of working GM that is super strong with operations, but I don't need them to do sales a bunch. The phone for us gets answered at Command Center. We have a lot of our pricing done on our website. So I don't need them to be sales driven. I just need them to run the team. And so there's different skill sets that I kind of look at based on the size of the business I'm bringing in. But I would rather be able to find someone that can just manage 6 to 8 employees instead of someone who can manage 20. And that's why for us, usually we keep our locations under $1 million in revenue. And then as it bumps up against that, we just optimize the pricing, i.e. raise them, to keep the growth down. Because I want to be able to hire a GM that only needs to manage about 8 people.
Yeah, really interesting. We're going to come back to price increases because that's a big topic for us. So I'm curious, and I guess I'll apply it later. My question is, executive assistants, yay, nay, do you have one? Do you have administrative assistant? Maybe, executive assistant can be a broad term. What is your thought on that?
In terms of a business of what size?
Let's just say 800,000, million for you guys, like that under $1 million. What do you think?
Yeah, I think if you can get someone that can do a lot of your admin tasks, more of like an office person, great. I want to grow past $500,000 as fast as possible. Because at 1 employee with me, I can do 200,000, I can do 250, I can be pretty profitable. But again, I'm in labor. I'm always in the field. If I get hit by a bus, the business stops. And I want to scale past 500,000 as fast as possible. I'm willing to have a little bit of waste, meaning I might get an office person, know that they're not always efficient, know that they're not always, their time isn't being super useful, but I hire them for 4 hours a day, and sure, I lose money sometimes. Their fixed expense, their overhead, whatever. I need to get past 500,000 as fast as possible. In terms of an executive assistant, someone that actually is just serving me personally, I think you got to be a bigger business, honestly. I think there's so many ways to be able to organize your day using very basic tools. And I think so many people are like, I need an executive assistant. And it's like, I've had an executive assistant. And they're great. They're great. Don't get me wrong. But I let them go, and I suddenly realized that having one for a while optimized everything in my day enough to where I could actually take it all back, and it wasn't a huge lift. I think the ability to have an executive assistant is important. Like, do you actually have a system for your inbox? Do you actually have a system for how emails and text and scheduling, how everyone can get on your calendar? Having the systems for an EA is actually the hack, I think. And you can then expand the runway before you actually need one. So I'm looking for probably the next few years to get a full-time in-person EA with me all the time to run meetings, go and start new departments, things like that. But that person is going to be a very different looking than the person I hired a couple years ago to like manage my inbox and my calendar. And so personally, I think from an executive assistant point of view, unless you're doing 10 million plus, I think usually you can optimize a lot of things in your day, your calendar, etc. But I would go hire one for a couple months because it'll force you to start using systems the same way you did for your business.
No, so good.
That's good.
I
Great
think
point.
it is true that it is the systems that you are forced to create because you have an EA or an assistant, administrative assistant. I think it's challenging because a true executive assistant, in my opinion, could run a meeting for you. They could be an executive, right? And I think administrative assistant, I even call it owner's assistant. Like, I think that's what's more valuable. Finding an owner's assistant, because as an owner, you're wearing all these different hats. If you can find an assistant who can temporarily support you in different roles, whether that's marketing or whether that's sales, whether that's with HR, who can, hey, I'm trying to hire someone. Can you screen all the applicants for me? Those kinds of things. I think that's where you can have a lot of lift as an owner if you have someone who's doing that more administrative assistant role, can answer phones, jack of all trades type role. I think there's a lot of value in that. But a true executive assistant, you're right. 10 million is probably where you're looking more like, okay, I need someone who can, run full meetings without me being present and make decisions on my behalf, right? So very interesting. Quick ad break to tell you a little bit about OpenPhone. If you're a contractor that has a single cell phone, you're probably inundated with text messages and phone calls, oftentimes that you can't be responsive to or that you can't answer at all. So what's the solution? You can buy another office line with Verizon or AT&T, and you can have an iPhone that is passed around from employee to employee, depending on who's on call. But what if there's a better way? What if there's a way that you can have all your phone calls recorded to go back and listen to later, transcribed with summaries so that you can get a quick glance at what happened during the phone call, and even connect it to your CRM where all your other customer information is? OpenPhone is the perfect solution because it does just that. You're able to add all the users you need to for whoever needs to have access to the lines for your company phone. And then you can also find all of the information you need at a glance with a centralized location for all phone calls and text messages with your customers. Whether it's for marketing, for sales, or for service, OpenPhone is the perfect solution for you and your team. If you're interested, we have an offer down the show notes from OpenPhone. Please click the link down the show notes, or you can see it here on your screen to be able to find more information about OpenPhone. Thanks for listening. Back to the episode.
Mike, I'd like to ask a kind of a go back question. You've got systems. That's definitional of a franchise, right? And you would anyway. Where did you record them? How did you keep them before you now have 105 stores?
150, I think.
150?
Yeah. So
anyway, where did you literally keep them? Did you write them in a notebook to begin with? And anyway, how did you actually do that?
Yeah. So a few things. First off, the definition of a system is essentially I have the same outcome, right? So in terms of like, what is a system? If you think about a system from the perspective like inputs and outputs, how do I get the same output every single time? Okay, there's a formula here. There's a reason why I sold that job. Is it because I shook their hand a certain way? Is it because I got the estimate at a certain time? Was it because the weather was like, there is a system for making that job close. There's the same way for every single aspect of the business. There is a way to close a job over the phone. There's a way to collect someone's credit card. There's a way to do everything. And so the very first thing I did before we franchised is I just listed everything I did in a day And I'm like, we must create a system for all of these. That was in the playbooks for the franchise. So it's like, how do I do an estimate? How do I make an estimate video? How do I format the estimate? How do I send the estimate via email and text message? Like, it was just a matter of like figuring out what I did and then systematizing it. And it's simply, how do I get the same outcome every single time? And to find that, I'm going to look at where the outcome was wrong and where the outcome was right. So when I did close the job, what was I doing? When I did not get the job closed, what was I doing? Oh, don't do this, do these things. As a system as a whole, when we look at the definitions, I like to think of it as the easiest way to create a system, especially for someone that is like not trying to franchise and they don't need the granularity of every little thing spelled out. I would say to simplify it is like, there's two ways to create a system: simplify and standardization. So for example, I'm going to simplify services. Does that mean I'm going to create a system around I'm going to systematize my business. Does that mean I can only do really basic generic tasks like mowing grass? No, you can standardize the way that you install cabinets, the way that you install paver patios, the way that you install irrigation. These are more complicated, quote unquote, but you can standardize complexity. Because the worst business is complex and it's custom. Like, if you wanted to do the opposite of creating systems, it is custom and it is super complex. The opposite is simple and standardized. And so when you look at it, like if you split that in a 4x4 matrix, I just want to get as close as possible to being standard and simple. And so if you can't simplify things, usually you can standardize them. And when we first started this process of getting ready to franchise, it was like, okay, I can standardize paver patios. And we did. We got down to where we were only installing 2 designs and 1 color. That's it. And it sufficed 95% of customers. Same thing with walls. There's 2 types of blocks, 3 different types of colors. That's it. And somehow 98% of people that wanted a wall wanted those type. When we showed it to them and it showed them exactly what it was going to look like, suddenly that was the ones they wanted. So you can standardize. But then it was a matter of like, can I simplify that across 155 locations across the world? That's going to be more difficult. And that's when we started simplifying. But all of those things are just systems in the business. How do I get the same outcome?
So I think what Martin's also interested in hearing here is like literally where was it stored? Did you have a Google Doc? Was this on a piece of paper? Did you keep it in a drive? Did you have a software for this? And then how did you deploy it? Yep.
So in terms of documentation, like I love screen recordings, especially around admin. Any task that's done behind a computer, you should be recording it. You should name it. You should put it into a folder, make it searchable. Pretty simple. Like when we first started, before we even franchised, I just told the office like, hey, we're growing. I can't be doing this stuff anymore. I'm going to make a video of me going through my inbox. I'm going to make a video of me selling a job. I'm going to make a video of doing follow-ups. I'm going to make a video of invoicing, scheduling, routing, dispatch, every single thing. And I'm going to name that video title in a folder. And so, now the cloud's around, so we can put it in Loom. You can put it in Google Drive. You can make a YouTube channel around it and make it private. And then make it searchable. So the big thing is searchability. So like even recently inside the franchise, fast forward to today, we recently created our academy for our franchisees where every single word in every single video is searchable. Because the whole value of systems is, can I find them when I need them? Like you can have a great hammer, but if you can't find the hammer when you need it,
got to have a system to find them.
Exactly. And so, using AI now, we can scrub every video. Someone can search, man, I know it's something to do with the estimate calculator, but I want to know about mulch specifically. Okay, mulch, estimate calculator in the search bar. Oh, this one video at minute 48, Mike mentioned it or someone mentioned it. And so that's really the goal is first off, rudimentary documentation using screen recording. Then I would put it into a database that's searchable. Those would be kind of like, grade 1 and grade 2 of standardization.
Are you now using, Mike, AI inside of there where you can chat with your systems essentially?
Dude, that'd be cool. We've thought about this. The challenging part is there's sometimes I believe that AI can give advice. Like, so we've ran this model, right? So because we have the transcripts. So like we could do this. Yeah. We could make a model. It's like, should I do X or should I do Y based upon these things? What I have seen is it is not confident in its answers. Whereas a coach, someone that has these inputs, has done it before, can confidently say, you should raise your prices. Yeah. And here's why. Versus an agent that most people just don't trust it. They do not trust it enough, and it is not confident enough to actually tell them what to do. And so when we create frameworks, we try to make it where it is based upon just the numbers. It's like, if X, do Y. If Y, do Z. And so technically AI can take that predictive nature and just tell people what to do. And that's what we're trying to do with Copilot. But even still, we as humans want to hear from someone else that's done it before and we have full confidence in, and they have a reputation with us. And this is why we still have the very manual process of doing monthly coaching calls one-on-one with owners, because they still need that.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like,
Okay, so a couple more questions. We mentioned price increases. How do you approach price increases, from what triggers them for you? What data do you look at? Also to how do you actually inform the customer, and how many customers are you comfortable losing, those kinds of things?
Yeah, so I believe that price increases are never a guessing game. It's never based upon the time of year. It's never based upon any other factor besides one thing. And we've already mentioned it, a capacity-based growth. I will grow my business to the point where I hit my capacities. At capacity, I will raise prices, or I will continue to increase my capacities and grow the revenue. So when I have 3 trucks and I can no longer squeeze any more hours out of them without buying another truck, I am at capacity for my asset capacity. When I can no longer get any more jobs sold because the amount of employees I need would have to increase and people are already working full time and they're going into overtime, I am at capacity. So I have a decision. When I hit capacity, I can either A, go buy more trucks and hire more people and grow revenue, expand capacity, or I can raise prices, decrease demand for my services, i.e. my close ratio, and increase profits. So that is the delineating factor, in my opinion, of profit mode versus growth mode. If when you hit capacity, you are buying more trucks and hiring more people and expanding your capacity, you are in growth mode. You're trying to grow the business. If when you hit capacity and you can't take any more customers on without buying more trucks or hiring more people, if you raise prices to optimize for profit, you are in profit mode. And in my opinion, you are one or the other. People are always like, I'm trying to grow, but I'm also trying to be profitable. It's like, that does not make sense. Because when you hit capacity, if you're raising prices, you are diminishing demand, you're decreasing close ratio, you're getting rid of customers. And ultimately, if you're at capacity and you have all these leads coming in, you need customers to leave. You need some of them to go. And so if you're at capacity and you literally can't do any more work without getting more trucks and equipment and employees, and you're not planning to do that and you want to stay in profit mode, when you raise your prices, you're hoping and praying that 10, 15, 20% of them leave to make way for all the leads that are still pouring in that you can't service and are willing to pay the higher prices. And so I believe it's just a matter of, are you at capacity? That's when you raise prices. I don't care what day of the week it is, what month of the year it is, whether it's cold, hot, raining, sunshine. I don't care. It is, are you at capacity? And if you are, you're making a decision. Either raise prices and increase profits and decrease growth, or you are going to go buy trucks, hire more people, and grow top line revenue.
Very simple, cut and dry.
Clarity.
Very, very clear.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Okay. So I guess you're talking to so many different franchise operators, but also different business owners, construction business owners, primarily in the home service, but other areas as well. Common threads. What are the most common threads you've seen between all of these? It can be around anything, but what do you see as commonalities?
If you asked me that an hour ago, I would have said probably what I already mentioned, which is they focus on the wrong thing at the wrong time. So the $100,000 guy thinking like a $2 million operator, $2 million operator thinking like the $100,000 guy. But to broaden that, I would say across the board, all home services that I have seen, there's one Achilles heel that is the denominator between every home service, just about every home service. And that is that we have seasonality. It's what makes it a horrible business, is we have seasonality. And because of that, to Martin's point, we have overhead that in the winter, all of a sudden, we are losing money. We actually have negative cash flow. And I believe that every home service business, if they could remove one quarter from their P&L, would be extremely profitable and have a great business. But because of one quarter where revenue drops by 80%, leads drop by 70%, we have to lay people off so we can't have continuity with our team. That is the crippling factor within this industry. And so I call it Q4 collapse. And that is, I have consistently seen about 20 to 30% profit margins in many home service businesses. and you add in Q4 or any quarter of the year that is bad, and all of a sudden they have 10%, 8%, 6% profit margins because they have negative cash flow for those 3 months. And so I believe that fixing Q4 collapse is the number one priority of every seasonal business. I call it seasonitis. It's a disease. It's killing us, and we've got to figure it out. And so there's multiple ways to do that. And I've been talking a lot about recently. We have a blue collar summit coming up. I'm doing like a whole day workshop on it. And it's like, there's 5 ways to fix this. There's 5 ways to cure seasonitis. There's 5 ways to fix this seasonal problem of Q4 collapse. And you've got to figure out a way to fix it. Cause like it is the Achilles heel of every home service business.
Okay.
Can you tell us what those 5 ways are?
Yeah. I can breeze through. So the first one is, one is shut down. And so shut down is, you lay off all your employees, you tell them to come back in spring or the quarter after, whatever. You turn off the lights, everyone's laid off, etc. Only works if you have very, very low overhead, you have no debt whatsoever, very low fixed expenses, etc. The second way is to essentially keep selling more of what you're currently doing. For example, yes, your leads might drop by 60%, but what if you doubled your marketing budget? Could you keep everyone busy and still keep the business above 80, 90% of what usual revenues are? Maybe. Only can do that if you know your marketing math, if you actually have nailed that down. So sell more. That's kind of like the second option. Do more of what you're currently doing. So for example, in some of our locations, they can continue mowing throughout the off season because it's still warm enough. So it's like, well, okay, great. Do we need to have a 70, 80% decrease in revenue, or can we just keep marketing that thing even though it has less demand? Can we suck up the demand that is in the market to us instead of the competition? The third thing is sell an adjacent service. So that is something that is slightly removed from where we're at, but not completely different. This would be, for example, like snow plowing during the winter. We have a truck. We're going to have to buy a plow. It's a little bit different insurance-wise. Can I add an adjacent service to my business? The fourth way is add a recurring.
Christmas lights.
Yeah. You're stealing my thunder. So 4.
Wait, everywhere.
Yeah,
oh,
you're
sorry.
fine. So 4 is add a recurring service, because ultimately you have seasonality, but if you can get a recurring service, it'll help get through that time. When for 2-3 months people cancel, there's not a lot of leads. How can I get my revenue to be more stable? And then the fifth way is add a new brand completely. So this is something we've done at Augusta in the past 12 months, and that is we added Augusta Christmas lights. So like we added a whole new brand, trademarks, website, augustalights.com, the whole 9 yards in terms of training and branding and everything, because it is essentially a brand new business adjacent to my other business. Now, I don't want to do Cure 5. I don't want to get there if possible, but I'm going to do it if required to fix the Q4 collapse. And so those are the 5 ways. So sorry, you guys stole my thunder on the Christmas lights.
I didn't know about
I love
Christmas
it. I love
lights.
it. Hey, you spoke into existence.
I've just, I got clients that are doing that. But here's another one I want your opinion on. Got some pretty innovative clients. They're actually arborists, certified, real deal kind of guys. Won't say too much about what they're doing, but they've got a monthly recurring revenue model, right? And it's not mowing is tough, but essentially maybe they could have collected all the money into actual working quarters, maybe. But what they're actually doing is spreading it out over 12 months. So they always have cash flow coming. A little bit of the question there is, am I better off to have the money in the bank or to have it come flowing in when I need it? But then you get into, well, would they have really done it? All that. But what do you think about a model like that where you're mowing, maybe you already do this, but you're mowing on a monthly recurring basis. It's for 12 months. It's not for the growing season.
Yeah. So can I have 3 minutes on this topic?
Yeah, absolutely.
Talk to our moderator.
You have all the time you
So
want.
I believe there's 3 different types of revenue. You have one-time revenue, you have reoccurring revenue, and you have recurring revenue. And you will collect more money up front with one-time jobs. You will collect more money up front for reoccurring jobs, and you will collect the least amount of money for recurring jobs. However, when you look at the valuation of businesses, they in part are based upon the dependability of the revenue coming in. And recurring has the strongest level of dependability. One-time jobs do not. For example, if you look at the valuation of Apple over the past 10 years, the number of iPhones or one-time sales has basically stayed stagnant for the past 8 to 10 years. However, in the same period of time, Apple's stock price has more than 10x'd. Why? Because they've focused on services, recurring subscriptions like iCloud, Apple Care, Apple Pay. There's like 6 or 7
Apple
things they've created.
Fitness.
All
Yeah.
of this, all of
Apple
these are
TV.
subscription. All of these are recurring revenue. Same thing with Microsoft Word, for example, Microsoft Office. 2013, you could buy Microsoft Office only one time only. Now, most of us buy it with a subscription on a monthly basis. Why? Because they can collect $149 up front. Today, you can go buy Microsoft Office one time, $149. Or $7 a month as a subscription. So to your point, Martin, yes, you could go get $150 today as a one-time job. Or you go get $7 and everyone's like, I'd want the $150. Why is it that Microsoft and Apple and these massive companies are pushing everyone towards the recurring subscription? Because their revenue is much more stable. And if you look at the revenues of a company like Apple, for example, they have a massive seasonality problem. Why? Because of one-time jobs. Everyone buys everything in Q4. And so you look at their service revenue and it's just slowly, steadily increasing. And the valuation of that business has gone up because of the recurring nature, and the stability of that revenue is extreme. And so when we're thinking about building our business to leave, what kind of revenue do I want? One-time jobs?
Yeah.
Or do I want much more stable streams of income coming into the business?
You know, just to put a point on that, not to supplement it, not to change it. You said it's worth more. When companies are valued, very simply stated, it's oftentimes a multiple of their earnings, modified earnings. The multiple for recurring, if the repeated every month ones, if I'm saying it right, recurring as opposed to reoccurring, can be double. I mean, you might get a 5 multiple for earnings, and you might get a 10 or 12 multiple for reoccurring, backed up with a contract, so it's not just going to disappear. But yeah, it's if you're planning on selling, that's one of the things you need to understand at least.
Yeah, you see it more and more. I mean, I haven't seen a lawn care company do that, but I see a lot of these HVAC and plumbing and electrical companies get you on some sort of annual or monthly, and you get tune-ups and checkups included with that, and then maybe a discounted rate for visits, stuff like that. So yeah.
Last week I was doing a turnaround for a company. They do about $2.5 billion. They're doing a handyman company, and again, they have a horrible Q4 issue, and they just lose hundreds of thousands of dollars during that time. So it kills them. So what we did is say, hey, look, we're going to offer this new thing that when every time we do a one-time job, I believe you can sell a recurring package. And you're like, well, what do I sell? Like, I did the job. It's done. It's a wall. What do you want me to do? Well, we can sell inspections. We can sell warranties. We can sell maintenance. And these are all things that will bring in more revenue, but also it gets you back on the property, baby. And especially for something like Handyman, where they have a lot of other services, you get to upsell them every single time you come for an inspection. Every single time you come, there's more to do. And so I believe that having more feet on the ground, the ability to sell again, upsell, and having a system for upsells is what makes a warranty program or makes an inspection or a recurring revenue business model extremely lucrative, not only from the stability of the revenue, but you keep selling more one-time jobs because you get on their property more often.
Yeah.
You know, to expand on that a little bit, I had a client a number of years ago in the trades. I need to be careful not, but one of the trades was plumbing, right? And he worked almost exclusively for these home warranty companies. And if you've ever had them call you up and offer you that deal, you know, I'm not doing it for that. Well, to give you an example, he would pay $150 to replace a water heater. Well, a water heater, when you buy them by the semi-loads, costs $400. And how do you do that? Well, this guy had really good books, and we looked at them every week. He had 55 to 65% gross profit margins. Now, how do you send a guy out with a thing that costs you $400, install it, get paid $147 or $150 from the warranty company, and have 60% margins? Just what you said. You're on the property. It needs to be moved up for code. The faucet's leaking, the toilet's leaking. It took me months of working with this guy before I believed it. But he's a genius, because most people, they call up and we'll give you $150 to replace a $400 water. They're going to drop dead. Anyway, sorry. I wanted to amplify your
I always
point.
think that, like, if you look at the longest businesses that have been around in the country, in the world, it's insurance companies. Why? They're selling air. They're selling peace of mind. They're selling a feeling. And so why can't we tap into that as home service business owners, where it's like, hey, I'm going to install the wall, but I'm going to also sell you the insurance or the peace of mind or the asset protection that the drainage is going to be done. It's going to be maintained well. There's not going to be erosion. These are things that we can sell to customers, but we just give up when there's so much more meat on the bone in terms of upsells, in terms of cross sells, in terms of downsells. There's just so much opportunity to keep growing.
Yeah, man, this has been fun. Thanks for joining the podcast again, Mike. You're all over social media. We'll link to all that stuff in the show notes. We'll also link to P4P and Copilot CRM. What's the URL for that?
CopilotCRM.com.
There we go. CopilotCRM.com.
Well, you got Copilot. Huh?
I know, we was before everyone else got it. It's so
Wow.
annoying. Goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great. Well, we'll put all that in the show notes. Anything else you want to leave with, Mike?
That's it. I really appreciate you guys having me on and everything you do for the industry.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, it's great.
You made it to the end of the episode, but before you go, if you found yourself thinking about growing your construction business while listening today, I want to share something with you. It's called our 24 Things to Hiring and Training the Perfect Executive Assistant for Your Construction Business. And it's a free guide that we've created. It's not theory. It's what we actually use to help contractors hire the perfect executive assistant. And really, we help you find ways to delegate over 50% of your current workload and get back 20 hours of your time every single week. You didn't start your construction business to just be doing admin work, to be buried in paperwork and endless admin tasks. This is the guide that shows you exactly how to find and train someone who can actually take all that weight off of your shoulders. So this is a real actionable, great PDF that has templates and processes. It's really, really great. And I want you to check it out, even just to get your feedback and how we can make it even more valuable. But I know that you're gonna love it. The link is in the show notes. Please download it. We'd love to see how much of an impact it makes on you and your business. Thanks for listening to the full episode. Check out the guide. It's free. No reason to hesitate. No reason to wait. Download it now. And before you go, I just want to ask for your gracious subscription to our podcast. So if you have 2 seconds, it means the world to us. Just subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or if you'd like our weekly newsletter delivered to your inbox whenever we release an episode, please subscribe in the show notes. Every week, we're talking about real strategies on how you can grow and build a profitable construction business that runs without you, so you can have less stress, more time, and more money. Click subscribe wherever you listen to the show, and thank you again for checking out the Cashflow Contractor. See you on the next episode.